Welcome to the Wake Up Protocol. I am your host, Nadja Haldimann, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further, faster, and feel a little less alone along the way. For this week's episode of the Wake Up Protocol, I'm joined by Derek Pennett, a Lightbody Technician, an advanced frequency healing practitioner, a Reiki Master, and a multidimensional cosmic messenger. Talking with Derek is like having a conversation with a galactic encyclopedia. He's got a wealth of knowledge that spans timelines, dimensions, star systems, and soul architecture. And honestly, some of it is even out there for me in the best way possible. But that's exactly why I wanted to have him on the show. Derek doesn't just help people feel better. He helps them reattune to who they actually are. From frequency upgrades to timeline remediations, he works across dimensions to help people reclaim their divine blueprint so they can shine from the inside out. In this conversation, we explore what it means to live as a multidimensional being in a three-dimensional world. How to trust your frequency, how to ground when your nervous system is overloaded, and how to navigate awakening with more coherence, clarity, and light. If you've been feeling like your soul is expanding faster than your body can handle, this one's for you. I hope it activates exactly what's ready to come online.
And so when that happened, there was a really big awakening moment. And within, I'd say 72 hours, my entire energy field was completely shifted from top to bottom. I've definitely always felt that I was quite unique on this planet, being Arcturian in my star lineages and Spican. If we have time, we can go into those a bit later. And then also just being naturally tapped into energy. So all my language throughout all my development years leading up to my Saturn returns when I was 29, those were all, I had a lot of cosmic and intergalactic dialogue that would come out of me, and it just felt like home base. Whereas everything else on the planet felt like something new that I was trying to experience and bring it into the fold.
Derek Pennett, welcome to the Wake Up Protocol.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to come on the podcast.
You are a very new connection of mine. We got introduced through a common friend, and I would say you're one of those new connections that is in alignment with this podcast that I'm putting out here. And I just want to start introducing you by your title, which is quite different than most people's job titles. So, and I'm going to have to read this because it's quite a mouthful. You're a Lightbody Technician, an advanced frequency healing practitioner, a Reiki Master, and a multidimensional cosmic messenger. Wow. Can you tell me a little bit about who you are and how you became the person that you are today?
Wow. So I do want to quickly slip in that Lightbody Technician. Basically, I put your metaphysical parts back into working order. Now, I'm a starseed, so I haven't been on the planet before. So this is my very first incarnation. And since I was a little child, I'm able to hear ear tones, like symphonies happening from the planetary energies, tones going off. Sometimes they're little pings. They'll stick around for a little bit and then they'll fade away. And I can see energy. My whole vision, 50% of it is energy particles. So then as I was coming into that, as I was a child, it was pretty easy for me to embody what that all meant. I just didn't have the language to then express it out into the world and use it as a technology, whether it's going into my soul's purpose or finding vocational work with it. And the pivotal moment when all of that settled in was when I became into the Reiki certification training, which was a gift for me. So I didn't see it coming. There was a partnership that I was with at the time, and the owners of the metaphysical bookstore where she worked at gifted a Reiki certification first degree. So when that happened, there was a really big awakening moment. And within, I'd say 72 hours, my entire energy field was completely shifted from top to bottom. I've definitely always felt that I was quite unique on this planet, being Arcturian in my star lineages and Spican. If we have time, we can go into those a bit later. And then also just being naturally tapped into energy. So all my language throughout all my development years leading up to my Saturn returns when I was 29, those were all, I had a lot of cosmic and intergalactic dialogue that would come out of me. And it just felt like home base. Whereas everything else on the planet felt like something new that I was trying to experience and bring it into the fold. So if I experienced something that wasn't linear and wasn't 3D, then I responded to it almost instantly. So it's like I'm remembering how to be human in this amazing vessel that I've been wonderfully gifted as well to utilize in this lifetime. So I'm very grateful.
Wow. There are a lot of words and concepts in what you just shared that are really difficult for me to understand. And I would usually consider myself quite open-minded when it comes to all of that, but there's just a lot of language that I would love to dive into a little bit more. So maybe if you just start with starseed and we can slowly start unfolding what you're actually explaining here so that I can understand it and our listeners can understand it.
Sounds wonderful. So a starseed is basically a being who hasn't been to the particular planet that they were birthed upon. So when we come into this incarnation, our soul's birthed into the body, we pick our astrological blueprints, we get our host parents, we get everything lined up in advance, and then we come back multiple lifetimes over and over again in different forms when we choose to. So that's the incarnational cycle, but the starseed would be not from Earth. If we were on a different planet, let's say Jupiter, then the starseed would be not from Jupiter originally. Now, quite a while ago, there was a big call out, a clarion call. So a big cosmic call out to all of this region of the galaxy, which is that it's really intense on Earth right now and it needs a lot of love, assistance, both vibrationally and then helping itself out in 3D as well too. Because there's a lot of intensities going on the planet for the particular density that it's involved in. So a whole bunch of starseeds. The legend is that there's 144,000 of us beings that originally came. And then from there, more has been birthed after that point as well too. They're high-level luminaries, and I don't like high or low as being better. It's just more so that the vibration is finer. And they carry a lot of codes. So I like to call those light codes. They get emitted through the aura. So just by being on the planet and just walking around in their day-to-day life, whether at the grocery store, they're driving a car, it doesn't really matter what they're doing. These light codes come off of the starseeds because they're naturally encoded to carry a large amount of vibrational current. And when I say vibration, frequency, and energy, that's because that's the primary feature for what we're made up, right? We use energy to power our vehicles. We're using energy when we get it from food, energy when we go to sleep, our cells. So we're deeply connected into that. But the starseed specifically acts as like an activator. So when they're around other beings, it naturally brings things to the forefront, things that want to be enhanced or other stuff that can be really intense in the shadow realms as well too. And then also, not always the case, but quite often the starseed's encoded to understand multidimensional living. So some of the terms I brought up earlier and the method and the ways that I speak is very much tapped into living multidimensionally, not just linear. So it can bring a lot of those codes in as well too. Quite often, they come from another star nation, whether it's Arcturian, Pleiadian, Sirian. It could be different spaces that they come from as well too. So it's a luminary that hasn't been on this planet before.
Okay, so if I hear this correctly, a starseed is a soul that is incarnated on a planet for the first time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now if that soul decides to incarnate a second time, would it still be called a starseed or not anymore?
I think there's a lot of flexibility because these terminologies are kind of the human language that we're using right now. And in the realms of cosmology, we're really just at kindergarten level. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to really increase our vitality in those areas. I would say yes, to a degree. It would be more like a fresh starseed that has come. They've more recently been here, but then they've had luminary properties that they brought on to the field. So technically speaking, no. But overall, yes, because they're recently here. And I mean, you can jump from all over different timelines quite frequently, different planets and dimensions too. For myself, I start in a higher density and then I come down to lower density planets that are going through an ascension process like Earth. And then I help them wake up some of the energy fields, and then I'll leave. I'm not coming back next lifetime. I've known that since I was born. And then when I go to another planet, we're going to do some work there and drop in density as well too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hearing two more terms that I would like to get a little bit more information on. Timelines and multidimensional. Let's start with multidimensional. So the way I understand dimensions is we live in the third dimension, which is the physical realm, the realm that we can see and feel and taste. And that third dimension is what we consider home. And I have heard people talk about the density here in the third dimension being really strong. And then there's lower dimensions, the second and the first. And then there's higher dimension, the fourth, the fifth, the ninth, and so forth. I don't even understand exactly how many. I've heard many teachers speak about that before. So I'm curious, when you say multidimensional, is that something that you personally are multidimensional, or is it something that we all are and we're just not aware of?
We definitely are all multidimensional, and you are right. It is the awareness level of remembering that that's part of our field. So here's a great way of explaining it. The dimensions, though, which what I'm about to mention, no matter how many we're working with, I don't get set on the exact number having to be the finite thing forever. It's an approximation because we're learning more as we go. We got 15 dimensions that we're using in this universe, and 12 are when we incarnate. As you go up, you become more transparent and more etheric. On 3D, that's our lens that we're currently using now to do the podcast, to talk, to interact, our day-to-day adventures that we go on. That lens has a third dimensional viewpoint, but it's using all the dimensions simultaneously. So it's automatically already multidimensional. But we've been entrained through various forms of programming, we'll say, plus the veil. When we incarnate onto this density, there's a lot of forgetting. And so when we're starting the process now of waking up those centers. For instance, when we went to start to the podcast today, we both arrived at the same time, but we didn't get there from the same time signature. It's completely different. Every being on this planet has a different viewpoint and a different lens to look through the emotions, the mental body, spiritual, and so forth. But on a physical level, it's a lot more linear. Something goes from A to B, and that's basically what it is. And that's where our point of attention has been really placed, particularly over the last few thousand years. So the multidimensional living and aspects of multidimensionalism is just opening up to that there's more than just physicality. But even if we take physical, you're doing so many things right now at the same time. We're breathing, we're talking, we're thinking. Even if we use our five senses and we're using multiples at the same time, like we're touching some fabric and then we're smelling the bread being cooked down the street, whatever is going on, we're already doing more than one thing at the same time. And so that's more multidimensional in itself naturally. It's just a forgetting at this point. And when you move through the multidimensional process and you start to awaken through self-awareness, as you were saying at the beginning, like your own spiritual awakening process, then you realize that things are more than just linear and 3D. All of them are plugging in together simultaneously. We could incarnate on Arcturus and be in the seventh dimension, and that would be our lens, but we would still be incorporating 3D on some level. So it's already intermixing in those ways. It's all happening simultaneously. It's just a matter if our awareness is picking up what's going on or attempting to have as much of that wide field in the viewpoint.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. And let me just make sure I really understood this correctly. So we are multidimensional beings, but we are living through the lens of the third dimension. And to us, that seems like the only reality until potentially a spiritual awakening or something else happens. And then we start becoming aware of other dimensions. Now, if we were to be aware of other dimensions, like let's say, for example, the fifth dimension, how would we know that there's other dimensions, and how would we experience that, and how could we integrate that with the third dimensional lens that we're currently in?
Right. Well, the universal laws that kind of go in and govern, I call them the original instructions, are different depending on the density or dimension that you incarnate in. So there's a whole different set of rules, I guess we'll call them, cosmic rules that interplay into there. But when you go down to the third density, what happens is there's a lot more forgetting. And through the process that we've been entrained in, the conditioning that's going on through many countless generations, that wisdom of there being other dimensions, that wisdom of the light codes that were made of energy, sound, frequencies, and sacred geometry doesn't get passed down as much through the generations. So then when these beings are birthed, let's say even into the fifth dimension, their parents and the community around them, the education systems, not in all cases, but quite frequently, it's bringing in that high level wisdom and starting them from their little pidlets. And so they're able to embody it, and it almost becomes like an infinity loop. And then it starts to feed into itself. And then that creates the catalyst for all of these rememberings to be constantly encoded into them. If we're filling them up now with intensities, shadow work, trauma, distorted systems, all the different, we're kind of negotiating now how we want New Earth to look. But when we feed that into the system for no less, the issues that we've been on Earth have been going on for at least 25,000 years. So that's a lot of stuff to put into the cellular memory and the DNA, because the two that are going to remember it the most outside of the Akashic records, which is like the cosmic internet, everything's being recorded in the cosmos. So when we pray or speak to our spirit guides, talk to God, consciousness, great spirit, whatever it is, it's listening. It's recording it. We are it. It is you. Now, the other two in the incarnational vessel is going to be your cellular networks and your DNA. So when you pass that information and encode it through speaking words, tones, education, how we nurture our children, they carry that with them. And then they pass that along to the new ones that are birthed as well too. And it just becomes a beautiful, like I said, infinity symbol. And it's just feeding itself all of that wisdom constantly. And then it doesn't disappear. So when you tap into universal law, what would be those things like, how do the energies of the planets hold together? How do we have weather systems? How is Earth a living, sentient creature? How is there portals that you can do to time warp through the suns? All of that is like encompassed into universal law, and each dimension is going to have its own set of rules in the hologram.
Okay, there's so much information for my brain to process right now, and my curiosity right now is, how do you know all of this?
Wow, that is an amazing question. So a lot of this stuff just came naturally online from when I was a child. It was a combination of a few things. So it was being online, like even when I mentioned earlier that I just knew that I wasn't from another planet, I was saying that when I was like 3 or 4 solar years on this planet. So it kind of came naturally. The main one is that when I connect into this information through the Akashic records, through a book that I read, information provided from another practitioner or a luminary on the planet, I'm all about assembling it all together. So I like to call myself a galactic encyclopedia. I remember it. It stays in my field, and it's like encoded until I leave the body, and most likely it'll stay with me. So I'm reading tons of material, absorbing lots of different stuff. But being an Aries is my sun sign, one of my key factors, and I'm sure you could dive even deeper into the chart and take a look with all of your astrology skills. Going in there, it's like a visionary thing. You can have 1,000 books on the wall, and I want the top 10, the ones with the most potent information possible. I'm not afraid to go where we need to go and check out what needs to be seen. So it could be a little bit of what I call a pioneer of perception. I'm looking for the key items, which this goes back to my Lightbody Technician, putting your metaphysical parts back into working order. I'm assembling all of that galactic information, all of those metaphysical parts, all of the multidimensional living, and I want to put it together as a whole. And that's my Libra aspect inside of me. It sees the whole balancing of everything, and then it wants to magnetize it towards. Because basically, even if you're going on 3D health, we're talking multidimensional living too, right? You have your eating food, your exercising, how you breathe, what you digest, how you think, it all matters. There's a little bit more to the equation. So I'm doing that with the galactic history and wisdom. I also have stuff come through from the Arcturian High Council. So the constellation of Arcturus, 7th-dimensional beings. I've sat on their councils before. I've taken a break from it because it's a high level of responsibility. And we do exchanges. It's not channeling, but we exchange thought packets. And periodically I'll write down some of the channelings and then I will share them online as well too, for the collective to see. So some of the wisdom does come through there as well too. And we're all connected to Great Spirit, Prime Creator consciousness. So I find the highest level of where that society is at collectively brings in the most potent information, whether on Mars, Earth, or another dimension, it doesn't matter. Let's bring it in and then work with whatever languages and culture and experiences that we have to merge them together.
What an amazing gift to have access to all of that. I would like to still ask you the question about timelines. You talked about timelines. What does that mean? I've been hearing a lot of people lately saying that timelines are splitting and we get to choose which timeline to be in. And conceptually, it kind of makes sense. But then when I really think about it, my brain gets all mushy and I don't quite understand. So what is a timeline and how do we get to choose which timeline to be in?
Okay. So there's infinite timelines, but on the main focus that we're working with Earth, there is a splitting of 2 timelines. Okay. So there's the one that could potentially stay in 3D, and then there's the new Earth that we're building. Once you incarnate again after you've done the multidimensional work, you have 2 ways you can get out of this dimension. You can either use one of the 12 stargates on Earth, which most of them are deactivated. They warp you to different parts in the cosmos. The second one is you can do the multidimensional work to allow yourself to get out of the 3D matrix. And when you move into that other timeline that we're still deciding as a collective what it's going to look like, then when you incarnate again, you can access that dimension to have it then built into there. There's parallel Earths, so there's 2 Earths running concurrently at the same time. Many of us came from the future back to the past to correct a timeline that didn't go quite as planned. So we talk about time warping. You can do all that stuff, but if we were to jump right now in time warp, we could see that timeline or be wherever we wanted to be, wherever we warped, but we can't affect it on the same level as if we incarnated and were birthed onto that timeline. So when you leave your body, you can go anywhere. So you have infinite timelines to choose from. But the main one they're talking about on Earth, it's like the paradigm shift and the splitting that's going on. And which one do you want to stay on? And they both have their beautiful qualities to them and their intensities. But the new Earth one is really wanting to step into the next octave of where Earth will completely shift its vibration and basically move out of 3D as its main lens. The other one will continue that one to go on, because just because you create something new doesn't mean that the previous one won't exist. That depends on how many humans or the collective of beings, sentient creatures that are on that planet. They get to decide what they want to create, and you can create more than one. But the thing is, we're working collectively, so there is going to be a mass of both going in either direction. Maybe all of them will combine and unify into another one. So when you do healing in the bloodlines, you can jump timelines depending on which aspect you're healing for which lifetime you came in. So we're kind of doing it every day naturally through the astral body, whether we're sleeping on a treatment table, getting a session, it's all over the place.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that. And I would like a little bit more clarification because it still feels a little foggy to me. So there's 2 timelines and the Earth is splitting into 2 timelines right now. One that's going to stay in the 3D, in the density and potentially in the fear energy. Is that correct? That frequency? Yeah. And then the other one is moving more into the love, peace, happiness, joy frequency. Do I hear that right?
It kind of goes in that direction, but the future is unwritten, so we don't know exactly how it's going to look. Could it be inner peace and galactivations and 12-strand DNA in one timeline? Could the other one be guilt and programming and fear? Definitely correct. But it could merge because it's not an instantaneous affair. It's the shifting of the vibration can usually take quite a long period of time, which, to let you know, we're in the photon band right now, which is pinned with Alcyone and Pleiades. And it's only 2 ages when you're in the photon band Aquarius, which we're moving into, and Leo. And when we're in the photon band, it's a whole new beam of light. Alcyone in the Pleiades is always in it, and it remembers our previous ascension processes, which we're currently in. So we're writing this story together, and that photonic energy is really bringing in multidimensional living and all of these metaphysical modalities and spiritual awakenings. So it's enticing it to go that way, but we're moving together as one unit, but you can have 2 different timelines going on. I mean, there's technically more than that, but those are the 2 main ones that we're going to be working with. You are correct. New Earth is more an illuminated version of what we're seeing on here on the planet right now, and creating that into that next octave. We do have a longer story at play where we've heard of Gaia. Gaia is 7D Earth consciousness, and it technically exists on another timeline because it's in the 7th dimensional lens. In between the 2 is Tara, which New Earth is wanting to go in the direction that Tara went. A lot of humans came from Tara and landed on Earth. All the energies that you experience in the astrology that you work with deeply, that stuff, all the planetary energies came from Tara's atmosphere that had a little bit of a trip up with the consciousness and a little bit of an event that took place. And all the different aspects of Tara, which is 5D, are Earth parallel cousin in the stars, New Earth version. All those energies of the atmosphere went into Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, and the archetypes that we're embodying based on the energy impulses that those planets are giving. When we unify them together and master them, then we create that 5D New Earth consciousness, because we're the whole wheel. We just have different aspects that are more illuminated in this particular lifetime, more highlighted. So that's kind of like the version of it. So that would be a 3rd timeline with Tara. So it gets more complex as we go. I'm keeping it as simplified as possible. Yeah, but it's pretty neat. So Tara merges with Earth. So it's merged with our particles right now. And that's what's creating this pulse, why you can have these cosmic conversations walking down the street on a more regular basis. And 20 years in the past, if we're counting linear time, it wasn't quite as common.
There's so much information. So you said Tara merged with Earth, and the astrological information came from there. So as you know, I've been going really deep with astrology for the last many, many years. And every once in a while, somebody asks me, but how do people know to associate certain meanings and properties and traits with certain planets and signs? And I don't know. It's just there. And when I work with it, it works. So is it that the information, the intel came from Tara and got incorporated into our dimension? Or do you even know the answer to that?
Well, it would be the combination of Tara. So that's having an influence. And when the planets merge, it's like it's astral particles are merging. So it's influencing stuff. And then on top of that, you have the universal grid work, which is universal law. And then you have the planets themselves, which are sentient beings. If a human moves up the chain of events, you can become an ascended master when you've completed your work. You can become an archangel. You can become a planet. So the planets are evolving with us. Just because they're larger, it doesn't mean they're any more important than who we are down here as well, too. And each one of them carries a signature. So for tens and tens and tens of millions of years, we've been observing that human behavior, right? Passing it down through the lineages. And astrology is one of those magical modalities that just carried with us. Since the first humans were on the planet in some form, we've gazed out into the stars and gotten information. But previous to all of this, we would have other visitors come from those stars and then communicate various wisdoms about what's going on in our solar system because they've studied it or they've incarnated here and been it. So it's the combination of all of them together and the wisdoms that you find in it. And then you bring into the fold all the master astrologers of this age, all the beings who are interested in the planetary energies. We're feeding that central database and learning more about it, because each archetype, each planet, you could write a 10,000 page book and it could constantly evolve even from that point too. That's why it's so fascinating. Astrology is amazing.
I'm realizing as we're having this conversation that I have a million questions for you, because everything you say I would love another half hour to an hour explanation on that. And I have a feeling you're probably going to come onto this podcast a few more times to help make sense, to shine some light on these concepts. And I want to pivot a little bit and come back to the Wake Up Protocol core questions, because I have 4 core questions in this podcast. And the first question is, how do you define spiritual awakening? Everybody has a different way of describing that. And from your perspective, I'm curious, how would you describe spiritual awakening?
Spiritual awakening is the moment of your own authentic truth when you've made contact, recontacted with yourself after going through the veil of forgetting with your higher self. It comes online and then it starts to speak through with you. And no two are the same. But for me, that was where the big contact was, realizing that everything is energy and then your higher self moving through you. And when those higher aspects of your own version of yourself start to come online, no matter what the catalyst is, whether it's a specific event that you went to, a certain podcast you listened to and it woke something up inside of you, or a book, it can come from anywhere. Usually it's the very simplest form that can start this domino effect. And then once everything rolls from there, it kind of takes a life of its own and you're co-creating the journey with it. And then you realize that your own relationship to the cosmos is your own connection. Nobody can ever take that away from you, and it's built right into the human equation. Mm-hmm. And so that awakening wakes up all those dormant parts inside of you, and they want to play, speak, and be seen in the world.
Mm. Is there anything else you want to add?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so much beautifulness there, too. I can speak of my own specific realms as well, too, intermixed into stuff. I really find that for a lot of individuals with spiritual awakenings, the common thread that I see a lot of the time is they're seeing through the matrix more, or they're realizing that everything is made up of energy. And so they tend to go down that pathway. Some individuals connect to acupuncture more because they need something a bit more tactile. And then others are interested in tuning forks or sound healing, some sort of metaphysical modality or at-home practice just seems to find you in some sort of a way. And then things get more illuminated. And then you start to realize that there's more than just me in this human vessel. And once you've gone even deeper into your spiritual awakening process, you almost look at yourself from the third person. You're like amazed that it's just like acting itself out. How is this soul intermixed into the human vessel? What's holding it into place? And so because of all of that stuff, that's where I went on this journey to discover all of the different aspects of how that actually gets housed inside of the human vessel. But it's interesting because you can awaken to all this energy and open things up, and you're starting to think way more outside of the box. Cosmology, multidimensional living is coming online. But then you have these moments where you go right back to 3D quite a bit and being like, if I don't take the human vessel with me, what good is the rest of my journey? Because it is my spacesuit, right? Everybody wants to go to outer space. I'm super cosmic, but we're already in space. We're on a planet, which is our ship, flying through space. And this is my spacesuit. So already, like, really, spiritual awakenings are like so wild, but it's already wild from birth. Even another human growing another human inside of themselves. Like, it's pretty wild. And that's my take on the spiritual awakening factor. There is a few cases, though, where sometimes the belief system that somebody was raised with might have interrupted the process of their organic discovery of who they are and their connection to the cosmos as well, too. So then that's where, with a lot of beings, I can find that that part wakes up inside of them and they almost take their personal power back. And then they redefine their own philosophies and belief systems as well, too. I like to tell everyone, belief, keeping it totally secure and locked into place. The word belief has lie in the middle, L-I-E, the double meaning behind words. How much are we maybe lying to ourselves? So whatever I share with you today, no matter what comes out, it's constantly being refined and it's constantly being changed and updated. So it is what it is. And also I'm not fixated on any of this being exactly where anything is. It's just my wisdom that I carry in this particular moment. But I do like to put in refinement and go into the studies and make sure that you're doing some deep dives.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot of people's spiritual awakening experiences coming from a place of being faced with their mortality. Maybe going through a cancer journey, or maybe losing a loved one, or going through a really, really difficult breakup or something like that. You mentioned that it can be really light, that awakening. And what I'm hearing here on this podcast is really, really heavy stories. So can you maybe talk a little bit about why that heaviness sometimes is the catalyst to start that spiritual awakening process in people?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly true. Some of the deeper intensities in the shadow work can bring us to those almost breaking points. And then it wakes something up from there. Near-death experiences a lot of the times where you can have a spiritual awakening as well too. Because then your astral body really gets kicked out. You've left the body. You're looking at yourself laying there, and then you come back into consciousness. And usually during that period, there's a little bit of a key moment. A lot of beings are like channeling God consciousness, prime creator, and then they get some sort of directive and they get to make a decision if they want to come back. That's when I find that a lot of moments like that, or intensities with losing a loved one, can kick in that, time on earth can be a little bit short, even though it's a bit of an illusion, but in this 3D realm, and I want to get in touch with my soul's mission. Sometimes it can be even simple as like a food choice, something very simple. Maybe like a being is just like swimming in discomforts from some of the choices they're making, and then it compounds like geological plates on the earth. And that intensity just gets to that breaking point where suddenly it launches us. It's either you change, or this is going to turn into dis-ease is what I like to call them. Mm-hmm. And so you can have those moments as well too. So it can be very variable, but I find some of the shadow work, because I am sharing a lot of cosmology, multidimensional living and stuff being in the light, but my journey was full of intensities, tons of it. And those moments of catalysts acted as big changes in my reality. And when you're in the middle of them, sometimes spiritual awakening isn't fun. It can be really intense and sometimes very isolating. Your whole friend group can change. You can have all sorts of new relationships pop in. Yeah, I'm going to meet my tribe and all that, but you're also dealing with some big intensities, and it doesn't always go that way. The end result is quite magical, but you really have to go inward and go solo and face some really big intensities. I find some of them get comboed up with astrology a lot. So your Saturn returns at 29, or when you have your Uranus opposition in that 42 to 45 range, Chiron returns. I find there's some moments like that, Pluto square Pluto, where it brings that stuff up. And if we check the astrological alignment, usually there is something being dug up at that point as well too. And I find the two play out together quite regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely know that there's a correlation between those hard aspects and pivotal moments in people's lives. So in the beginning, you mentioned that you came through as a starseed and you had that awareness at a really young age. Do you feel that you were already born with a sense of connection to your higher version of yourself, or did you have a pivotal moment where something shifted and you went through a spiritual awakening?
I definitely felt pretty connected as a child, but my upbringing had breathe room for me to play and explore, but it definitely didn't have the languages and the education to bring that stuff into the field or my curiosities. I mean, I would walk around on the playground as a child and have long conversations with the sun, like the amount of stories I could share with you connecting to the plants and the animals, and being able to just touch a leaf on a bush or a tree or a plant and be able to receive downloads of information. That's been regular. I will mention my critical moment that took place. And then when it came to the ear tones that I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't know what to do with them. I remember I was in grade 9 and I had so much of a symphony covering 60% of my hearing that I laid on my bed for 3 hours with my hands cupping my ears, only realizing that I was sending it energy, but I was wanting to soothe it because it felt so discomforting. Now I know how to sit through them and how to meditate through the process to receive the information. The biggest catalyst was when I was 29 at my Saturn returns. That's when the higher self aspects came, and what you mentioned earlier in your question of how that stuff kind of registered, that now I'm consciously awakening in those ways. And that was due to a twin flame partnership that I had. My version of twin flame is two beings that get together. They cause a spark and a flame. Some radical shift happens. It's usually short term or a little bit longer term, and then they go their separate ways. And
thanks for explaining that, because there is a difference between twin flame and soulmate, right?
Yes. Soulmate, I find, is more a being that you can nest with for an extra longer period of time, or it flows really easy in terms of a partnership. It could be for a life partner as well, too, while you're incarnated. And with the soulmate, I find a lot of the times you're almost dating yourself, because they end up being part of your soul group or your oversoul. And you have so much in common and everything flows so well. It's another fragment of your being. So when you're born, there's 144 of you that make up your oversoul. In that regard, back to when I was 29 really quick, the twin flame relationship, they were a master astrologer, Kundalini yoga teacher, and then they also worked in a metaphysical bookstore for up to 13 years and took it really seriously. So I had a great introduction at that point to all things multidimensional, whether it was crystals, drinking reverse osmosis water and putting minerals in it, what's going on with society in general, all the archetypes of astrology. I was a little bit resistant, to be honest with you, with a couple things at the beginning, because so much was moving so quick. I did mention that I adapt to these things quick, but I do remember that first initial, because it came in such a big wave. Their whole life was super cosmic. They were doing gong baths, the whole bit, and it was just amazing. So I'm so grateful that that big wave came in, but it challenged me in very big ways. And most of it was magical, but there was some very intense moments along the way as well, too. But I'm so grateful. And so that went on for about 7.5 years of development and going inward and doing the work and then stepping into the seat of my multidimensional living.
Yeah, thank you for taking us on that journey. And was that during your Saturn return at age 29 that started?
Yeah, totally. Almost right on the nose. It kicked in there. And then it went on till about 31.5. So I went on a 7.5-year journey with this human, this sentient creature on Earth. And the main impact was to about 31.5, 32. So my full Saturn returns was a complete overhaul. And this was the way I was living, speaking, talking, acting, and showing up in the world. And really, it wanted responsibility, which we know Saturn works with that in a very big way. So my initiation into adulthood was, we're changing all of your food, natural fibers are coming in, all the good stuff. And I basically dove in for it. And simultaneously, you're then going to have the awakening of the cosmos come through. Some metaphysical modalities are starting to come online to help remediate the energies, detoxify the whole bit. And then when I was in 2014 with the same partnership, there was a being that kept coming into the bookstore and they really wanted to offer a book and they kept bringing it over and over again. And finally they accepted it. Well, they passed it along to me to read. And it was a book by David Icke called Remember Who You Are, Where You Are, and Where You Come From. And so when I got to 2014, that's when the Matrix stuff opened its veil. And then I had a huge wave of that stuff come through as well. That book I read really slow over the course of 4 to 5 months. And I would only read maybe 10, 12 pages a day. And I sat with the info and every subject under the galactic central sun came pouring out to me. And that one was so magical, but probably closer to the most challenging time I've ever had. Because I didn't get a little bit about the Matrix. I got the full picture within 2 years, everything.
May I ask you what the Matrix is? We've all seen the movie The Matrix and people talk about the Matrix, but what is it?
So the Matrix movies are definitely on par with how it's showing. The way I like to describe it is it's a false version of the organic human experience that wants to take whatever we've created, manipulate it, mess with it a bit, delete some things along the way, and then resell it back to you, all of it at the same time. What the water, the food, what you drink, what you eat, what you consume, how you breathe, the entertainment that you use, the types of architecture, the whole bit. It wants to create a synthetic reality instead of an organic biological reality. And then it resells it back to us and creates systems to hold itself into place, at both energetically and in 3D as well too.
And is that maybe the lens of the 3D that we see the world through, or is that different?
It would definitely be a huge lens of it, because if we go back to kind of how this all started, it was denial and conditioning. And slowly that got inputted into our system. And then eventually there was more things layered on top of it. And then in the collective, we know fear and anger can be a really big one as well, too. And so that lens with the matrix is overlaid with the other one. You talk about the splitting of the timelines. It's like you have your new earth lens, or all the beautiful new earth aspects that came before it. And then you have the matrix lens, and they're kind of being overlaid simultaneously at the exact same time. So it really depends on how that human chooses to view them and work through them. But they are influencing each other quite regularly. I don't like the word battle, but they're kind of like going at it with each other, figuring out how are we going to integrate the best aspects of both. Because I don't feel that anything, no matter how intense it is, cannot have a good quality mixed in with it. Everything has a purpose or a polarity when you're in 3D. So we talked about what is 3D. 3D is where you have polarity at its highest gains possible. And so for everything that the matrix is doing, it's also showing us areas that we need to wake up in, because we allowed that to be created in the first place. It didn't just walk in overnight and take over. This is a very slow 250,000 year journey. And just to give all the listeners a key code, we've been on this planet in human form, kind of, for 550 million years on this one timeline. So we've been here a lot longer than we've been told. It's pretty amazing. In this form, it's more 250,000, and then it started to spread from there as well, too.
Yeah, there is just so much more to reality than we think. And I'm curious to hear new perspectives on these things. And when I see it through my lens, what matches and where I want to get more information to see what else is out there. In terms of the matrix, I'm really interested in figuring out how to quote unquote hack the matrix so we can live the bestest version of ourselves. And one of the things that I've learned recently is to just dial in the frequency, that it's almost like a radio station, that we're sending a frequency out by embodying the frequency and then automatically magnetically attracting that frequency. So I've been playing with that quite a bit lately, and I've been trying to get into a certain frequency, and it's fascinating how life has been rearranging itself around me because of that. Is getting into a frequency and really embodying that a way to navigate the matrix, or are there other ways? How do you see that?
Oh, wow. This is awesome questions. I'm loving this. So I like that you're using the frequency analogy, because that is one of the main key features that works. If your cell phone's listening to everything that you do and sending you ads all the time, then why don't you rewire your thoughts so that it's just going to pick up what you're thinking? So if I want EMF protection, I just think it all the time, and then it starts popping up in my phone. So you match that frequency and then also see what the technologies are doing right now. And then you can call in what you need within that. I think the main thing is going to be figuring out how we negotiate a brand new system so that we can do commerce and economy on different ways. However that looks, if we even need the certain aspects that we plugged into it. Now, as far as exiting from the matrix, one of the key things that I like to do, and it takes a lot of effort, but you can do it very slowly, is anytime you catch something that has chemicals in it or is a mainstream brand name, et cetera, of something that you're like, I don't know if there's something quite right about this in your home. What you do is you wait until you've used it up, and then you go find the replacement for it. Because everything we want to shift to that next octave is currently being created. Whether it's a cleaner for your house or some sort of body care that you use. Because once you go into multidimensional living, quite often you're shedding all the chemicals and all the toxins that are in the field. So you go through that way and you rewire stuff. Another one that I do is I don't flash any of the brand name stuff on my clothing, on my objects, because there's already enough advertising going out there. So that's another key one to just maybe consider. Other aspects is like making choices. Am I going to go to the forest today, or am I going to go to the shopping mall? Do I have a purpose at being at the shopping mall because I needed this one thing you can't get anywhere else based on how your city, town, or area is laid out? or do I want to go to the forest? So it's making those choices on a daily basis to deplug from that system. The main one is we're still going to be slightly in it anyways because it's covering the globe. But the main aspect is that you can take your consciousness and move it away from that field so that you cannot be programmed no matter how much programming is attempting to influence you.
Mm-hmm. I hear that a lot of people are making pretty profound shifts in their lives after having a spiritual awakening. They tend to hang out with different people. They consume different foods and drinks. They start exercising. They start connecting more with nature. And it sounds like being more mindful of the types of products that we bring into our experience is potentially one of the things too that will change. For me, wearing a lot more natural fibers, even scents, artificial scents like perfumes and things like that, they're no longer vibrationally working for me. They give me headaches and make me kind of dizzy. I'm noticing that it's actually no longer working, and it's something that I had no problem with before. It's not that I have a problem with, but I'm just really noticing that I'm no longer enjoying those things. And I actually just yesterday saw an advertisement, which I guess goes back to what intention you have, about linen sheets and chemically treated linen sheets. And there was even some research that when people sleep in linen sheets, supposedly in hospitals, people used to sleep in linen sheets and they would heal 40% more quickly than when they start putting different or even artificial sheets in hospital beds. And same thing with bandages. When they had linen bandages, the wound would heal 40% quicker. I'm not sure that's really true or not. I haven't done the research yet, but it resonated with me and it makes me think maybe I want to upgrade my sheets to linen. It's a material I absolutely enjoy. So yeah, just making some of those choices feels aligned with this frequency that we're all on.
Yeah. And if you study the fabrics and actually put frequency readers up to them, they carry different hertz. Mm-hmm. So I'm not hooked on which charts say what in terms of the exact numbers as I'm about to share with you, because you're going to see a whole bunch of different versions. But the main one is certain fabrics vibrate higher and they have a finer frequency. So linen, I've seen two different charts that show different numbers, but like linen and wool and stuff like that vibrate at 1,000 hertz. Whereas like polyester is 15 hertz, which is the frequency before you're about to go through the leaving the body process. So the death process. So there's things to consider with that stuff as well too. And then with bandages, a lot of them are bleached and have chemicals on them. So that's not going to help your wound heal any quicker as well too. And when you were mentioning that also with the chemicals and different things resonating different within the body, that's another ascension symptom of when we have a spiritual awakening, is suddenly you can walk down the street and you can smell toxic laundry detergent. And when you were a child, you're like, well, I could kind of smell it. It was a little bit there. Now it's wafting down the street for what feels like 30, 40 meters, and it makes you dizzy. So you get this awareness of the impact of what it's actually doing to the body. And you also asked earlier too, what can you do to exit the matrix and bring things full into the fold? Another one I'd like to add is, what do you want to create? What do you as a human want to bring into the fold that's going to help us then exit the matrix? I've chosen to do advanced frequency healing. There's many different things we can do. I remember before there was any major EMF protection, we just had a couple crystals and organite, which are amazing, not to devalue them. They're super special. And I kept thinking, when are we going to start getting the tech coming out to have that stuff? I'm not going to be the creator, but I'm going to go in there and I will participate in helping keep your company going, and I'll use the devices if they're brought from a good source. And then a couple solar years later, it kicked in, and now you have all these remediation devices covering the globe. So what you think is what you're going to create. So adding that into the mix can also assist, right? We want to remutate the matrix into a form that more matches the original human experience and its evolved version of where we ever want to take it.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Thank you so much for all the wisdom you're sharing here. I want to be mindful of our time here, and we are coming towards the end of this recording. I want to give our listeners a chance to find you, and if you have any offerings to share. So what do you want to share with our audience?
Amazing. Thank you for this opportunity. Basically, head over to my website, which I'll let you know in a sec. It's got all of my sessions and offerings that I do as advanced frequency work. So I do in-person and long distance, and I'm mixing a whole bunch of advanced metaphysical modalities. I have energy treatments that you'll feel the effects probably at least for 4 to 6 weeks after the session. And my website has a hub for everything that I create. So whether it's the metaphysical music or some of the oracle deck work I've done, and primarily my sessions, events, and offerings and workshops, because I do teach a lot of these different subjects, and Reiki certification training is in the mix as well too. So everything's on that website, and it runs you through a little bit of all of the work I do, how my sessions function, and I can assist with absolutely anything in the cosmos. There's nothing that can't be remediated. It's just a matter of finding the right frequency technology with the modality and the right intentions from that human and the environment to support it.
Beautiful. And what's the website?
So the website you can go to is linktree/the Cosmic Messenger. My name's Derek Pennett, but my business name is the Cosmic Messenger.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Before we end, I have one final question for you. If you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you, what would you tell him?
Oh, wow. I would give the younger version of myself the most biggest galactic hug ever and let them know that I am so grateful that they were birthed upon this planet. I would lay them down beautifully in nature and put my hand over top of the heart and just send a message of remember who you are. And I know that that will set the key code in motion and that all the blueprints are waiting to be awakened and all will be okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Derek. What a pleasure to have you as my guest, to get so many downloads. My brain is completely full at this point. I'm probably going to have to listen to this a few times. I hope you're going to come on to this show again at some point as my guest and answer more questions and explain more concepts. It almost feels like you're a cosmic encyclopedia who can answer all the questions that I have instead of having to go to all these different resources. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It was such a pleasure and many blessings on your journey.
Oh, mega deep gratitude for being here, and I'd gladly come back on the podcast again. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper, head to thewakeuprotocol.com and sign up for our email list. That's where we share behind the scenes insights, bonus resources, exclusive invites, and the kind of guidance we only send to our community. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going, trust yourself, follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.